It's wonderful to see you all. Thank you for coming, especially since the time for this session has been changed, so I'm sure that inconvenienced some of you. But we've got this absolutely dazzling panel of fiction writers to tell us where does fiction come from, which I'm not sure I can answer. I don't think it's a question that can ultimately be answered. So I listen to them. I hope they have more answers than me. Fortunately, I'm not the one doing the answering this time. I'd like to talk to each of them a little bit about their latest books. And then we'll take it from there and talk about inspirations, research, architecture, whatever interests the writers who are on stage. Can I start with you, Esther?
Of course.
Your new book is My Sister and Other Lovers. And I remember reading ages ago your first book, Hideous Kiki. And in both these books, you draw greatly on your own life, which you're very, it's not something you try to hide. You've spoken about it, and you've talked about how heartbreak can be repurposed to art, and how writing about your family is often like throwing a bomb into the house. Would you talk about turning personal life into material?
Yes, it's interesting. I was being interviewed about this new book, which is quite, I have drawn a lot from my own life. As you said, also my first book, I've written many other novels which haven't drawn so closely, but I wasn't sure with this book for the first time in my writing life of 30 odd years, I wasn't sure what story I needed to tell, which comes to your question, where does fiction come from? Sometimes you don't know, you need to write, but you don't seem to know where it's coming from, but you know it's inside somewhere. And for me, the answer isn't really to stop and think and have a break, as sometimes people suggest. I just kept writing, and eventually it evolved into this book, which I did need to write. Throwing the bomb, for lots of writers, I'm sure there are many writers in this room, I've always been quite a sort of peaceable person, especially in my family. I'm probably the one who gets on best with everybody. I make that important to me. But when it comes to being a writer, the famous shard of splinter of glass is quite sharp inside. And I find that I do anything to make the book work, even if it means causing some anger towards me. I realize that I'm prepared to do that because it's so important to me that the book is as powerful as it can be in its ability to communicate a story that I need to tell. So I'm always surprised. I'm sitting there thinking, oh, I didn't even recognize myself, but here I am. I'm just going to write it. Maybe I'll edit it later. But if it's good, it has to stay in.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Percival Everett is joining us on Zoom. Thank you, Percival. It must be an unearthly hour for you.
No, it's fine. I apologize for not being there in person.
Yeah. Well, Percival, your book is about a retelling of Huckleberry Finn from the point of view of the slave. And what I found absolutely fascinating in that was the role of the pencil, because language is at the center of the book, and how language is, there's a kind of private language and a public language, and it's both for rebellion and oppression and subversion. Would you talk about that? I'm particularly interested because in India in the 19th century too, women were not allowed to read and write either, as you say, of the slaves.
Well, it's certainly true that any people who are oppressed or enslaved, imprisoned, find a way to talk to each other that does not allow entry of their enemy or their oppressors. I hesitate to use that word because it suggests a level of victimhood that I don't recognize. So it's a human thing to have a way to speak, and to speak the way your enemy expects you to speak as a matter of survival.
Okay. Well, can I move on to you, Richard? Um, Question 7. I was really intrigued that quite a bit of the research that you did for Narrow Road to the Deep North forms the beginning of question 7. But what astonished me also in your book is the way there's a kind of historical novel embedded in it. And H.G. Wells more or less manifests the atom bomb. Would you like to talk about that? But also, while talking of fiction, I need to hear a story from you about an Italian TV show that you've once done.
I understand your editor spoke about it, and a story from Italy's escaped here to India. But many years ago, the last time I was asked this question was on an Italian TV show. I was doing an Italian book tour, and it was this high culture show that the Italians still do, and it was a half-hour interview with this sort of Milanese spiv. He had this beautiful Italian fine wool suit, and I was brought into the studio in Rome at Rye, and there were lots of people. It was very Italian, lots of people running around, and they raced down and they put this earpiece in my ear and a little radio pack, and they told me how he would ask questions in Italian and I would respond in English, and it was going to go out live across the Italian peninsula on a major channel. And I looked across to the host, who'd never acknowledged that I was there or said anything, and he was just sitting there in this beautiful suit, and he was just flicking lint off and straightening his creases. And he suddenly looked up and he saw me, and he screamed, and he screamed and screamed, and everybody in the studio was electrified, and one of the technicians ran down and pulled the earpiece out of my ear and the radio pack from my waist. And then I looked round horrified, and I saw the floor manager doing that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the monitors, everything started to roll, and some music came up, and the spiv in the beautiful Milanese wool suit started talking to me in Italian. And then he stopped.
I'm going to start in Hindi now.
Yeah, that's right. And so I looked through the glare of lights to my Italian publicist. For some reason, I had 2 Italian publicists that the publishers had allocated in a typically generous Italian gesture, and they just went like this, talk. And so I started talking for what seemed an appropriate amount of time, and then I stopped. Then he spoke in Italian, then I spoke in English, then he spoke in Italian. And so we went for half an hour, and then it finished, and I hadn't understood a word he'd said. And then the credits rolled, and he came over, and he said it was one of the best interviews he'd ever done. And I realised that fiction comes from making up stories to answer questions you have no idea what they mean.
Yes. In fact, you do say in your book that you quote Chekhov to say the role of fiction is to ask questions and not to provide the answers.
Yeah, Chekhov, he wrote that in a letter to about Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, and he said that it framed the questions correctly. And I think when novels succeed, they don't propose answers. Answers are the province of politics and religion and ideology, but a novel's job is to ask questions and reflect the chaos of life. So in this book, Question 7, that's what I was seeking to do.
You know, since we are talking about writers, Kiran, you have this magnificent scene in your book, The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny, where the 2 main characters are going to meet. And you narrate this on a train where they sort of pass each other. One of them is reading a book. and the other wants to see which book is she reading. And the book is one of my favorites, Yasunari Kawabata's Snow Country. Would you talk about what made you pick that book?
Yeah, thank you. And I should also say that, one of the reasons I have an alignment with your work is because I remember reading about how you loved Kawabata in some interview. So what can I say? Maybe writing comes from providing answers to questions you don't know about. Maybe writing comes from reading other writers and deeply, it comes from other books. And this scene of Sonia and Sunny first meeting is a reflection of the characters in Kawabata's Snow Country first meeting. And I was thinking about Kawabata's Snow Country and Kawabata in general because he was a Japanese writer, a novelist who I think he was educated in the Western novel, but he was a deeply Asian writer. And when he won the Nobel Prize, I think in the 1960s, he gave a speech. His Nobel speech was about how his work was imbued with the ideas of Zen Buddhism and haiku, and talked a lot about how he used reflections and metaphors to unsettle reality. And that was useful to me. When I was writing Sonia and Sunny, I began to think of how it would be to write a novel imbued with ideas that were not Western ideas, but Eastern ideas.
Did you, Tash, I loved your book. I was just telling you the whole sort of, and we were just talking about how Tash's book, in which two teenagers fall intensely in love in the backdrop of a family farm going to ruin, how that is almost like the first book a writer would write rather than late in your career. And this is meant to be the first of a quartet. So I wanted to really understand how you build a quartet. Do you already know how you're going to go ahead? Does the reception of this book affect what you will write next?
The answer is that I have a vague idea, but I'm not entirely sure of where it's going to go. I have an idea that we'll see the same members of a single family at different points in their lives, so maybe say at 10-year intervals. But the truth is I don't know if I can finish the quartet. I'm going to have to because I've sold the books to my publisher and spent the money already. So I think I need to do them. But in terms of how... I think, when you ask us where fiction comes from, I think the first thing I think of is a distinction between fiction and non-fiction. And the more I progress in my writing career, I think like a lot of people, I don't really believe in the distinction between fiction and non-fiction anymore. I still believe in the form of fiction and what it can do. But as we all know, a lot of fiction is inspired by how we react to the world, if not directly by our own lives and by our own families in particular, because we always think that the writer is an individual being possessed of great genius, but in fact they are always a product of the community, the society, and specifically the family that they grew up in. So this quartet is about a family that looks very much like mine, isn't exactly like mine, thank goodness. And the reason I started with a teenager's point of view is because I think when I was a teenager, I think there's a sense in which none of us ever gets over being a teenager. It's such a complicated time. We're not a child anymore. We're not an adult. And that time is so complex and so difficult when we're living in the moment. And it's only now that I'm much older that I can look back at that time and think about how beautiful it was and how terrifying and how it was so kind of complex, and it takes a long time for a writer to work out how someone feels.
Is it actually a sort of phase of life? I wonder, Richard, reading your book, because you write so much about your childhood, your parents, in this book, which is as Tash said, you can't really separate out fiction and non-fiction anymore. So although it won a big non-fiction prize, I really felt as if it was hard to pin down what it was.
Well, there was big debates in different publishing houses whether it was non-fiction or a novel, and in fact it won the major non-fiction prize in Britain, but then it was shortlisted for most of the novel prizes in France. So I think labels, as they say, are for jam jars. And
yes, that's a good one.
I'm not trying to be dissembling, but when I started writing, I knew a lot about writing, and the more I've written, the less I know.
Yeah.
And I simply did a gig in Los Angeles once with a famous American writer who must remain nameless, and they asked her first up how she wrote her books, and there's this idea that industry and hard work, because people want to believe that art, books, things, that they come from toil. But, and there is some truth in that. But she talked for about 15 minutes about how she assembled databases, sent researchers out, did oral histories. I was utterly exhausted at about the 8-minute mark, just listening to it. And finally she ended, and there were about 2,000 earnest Californians, and they just couldn't applaud hard enough. But it had been a little tedious, if I am to be frank. And so then they threw to me and they said, how do you write yours? And I said, well, I'm Australian, we're a bit lazy. I said, I get up in the morning, sit at the table and make it up. And the dreadful thing was, not one of those 2,000 earnest Californians laughed. There was a terrible silence gripped the hall. But I think there is a large element of play, and you're always trying to animate that in your work.
This morning, Jeff Dyer was talking about how you don't need to have a sense of humor if you're Californian. You were going to say something, Kiran.
I can't remember what I was going to say, but I remember when I was teaching, I remember a student was a bit depressed because he had not won a prize, and he had not won a prize for autofiction. And I just said, what is autofiction? I mean, how does that differ from fiction? Because autofiction, non-fiction, fiction, I don't know how any of it can be separated. And I was recently reading Garcia Marquez's memoir, Living to Tell the Tale, which I think was supposed to be 3 volumes. It's 1 volume. And you read it, and you would never be able to tell, it's a work of non-fiction. It's about his journalism, and he said journalism and fiction are 2 wings of the same bird. And you can just see where his fiction comes from, and it's just an extraordinary piece of autofiction, I guess, although I'm sure he would burn that term. But extraordinary piece of work.
Do you call your fiction autofiction, Esther?
I don't. I call it fiction because that gives me so much freedom. I love fiction, and I have never written any memoir. And people, with my first novel, which was really a story based in my childhood, people asked me, why didn't you write a memoir? I was like, well, that would have limited my ability. What happened when I couldn't remember? I was only 5 years old, whereas as it was, when I couldn't remember, I just closed my eyes and made it up, and I tried to keep the spirit of the story, which is, in a way, all you need. It's the spirit. But I'm interested in the autofiction question because I feel that there's quite a lot of really wonderful autofiction writers as they've been branded, maybe themselves or the publisher, which has actually given more respect to that kind of storytelling, which I feel has actually, as a result, given more respect to the kind of writing that I do, where I'm not pretending this is nothing to do with me. I've always been very open. Yes, I took this story out of my life and I've embroidered it and made it into a story that's more universal. And sometimes people say, but some of it's true, as if that made it less powerful. But now with autofiction, where it's been quite intellectualized, I feel there's a whole new profound respect from people like Annie
Now,
Anu
Scott.
and Maggie Nelson. And I really like it. And I'm happy for these people to be autofiction writers. And I also really love these books because I love it when people are honest and open about this is actually something from my life. It's my favorite kind of writing.
Just as an observation, it's strange that you mention the fact that Hideous Kinky was intended to be. You thought of it purely as fiction, because when I first read it, whenever it was, I first read it. It read to me completely like a memoir. I felt that there could be nothing truer than that, and I think you're right in that we tend to think of literature in different forms and different hierarchies. So you have the great fiction, which is attached to the great novel, the great European novel of the 19th century, and in its 20th century forms attached to a lot of the big Japanese novels or the big Indian novels, and that is attributed great gravitas and seriousness, whereas writing about yourself, I think people still find embarrassing and slightly awkward and too easy, and I think that is not a useful distinction to have. I think it's really helpful that those distinctions have been broken down.
Percival, when you were sort of doing your take on Huck Finn, how many times did you read that book?
Sadly, 15.
15?
Yes. I needed to divorce myself from the work. I needed to blur it and forget it. The real sadness is that 10 times was probably enough.
Did you still like the book at the end of it?
Not at all.
I mean, how did that? You didn't like it at the end of it, but how did that? Did you like it the first time? Is also I don't think so.
Well,
It's hard to hear what you're saying on this bouncy thing, but
strangely, in person, my voice is not synced with my lips either, so.
Yeah, that's a kind of weird.
I'm a lover of Twain's writing, and his nonfiction is fantastic. Huck Finn happens to be a failed novel. It's an important novel, but it's not the greatest work of art. One of the reasons is because of the reintroduction of Tom Sawyer at the end. I hate Tom Sawyer. And it's for mercenary reasons. Twain, like most of us who write, was famously in need of money, and thought that he could save the book, have it be a success, if he inserted his money-making character.
Okay. I didn't. Yeah.
Money-making character, I think. The voice, is a.
Yeah, there's a kind of echo.
There's an echo.
So it's hard to. Yeah.
Oh,
you
good.
Can? Yeah. You're okay. You can hear what's going on. Okay.
If I can
Yes, I hear you perfectly.
Yeah.
If I can pick up on something
Yeah.
Kiran was saying about Marquez, he said nothing he wrote. He saw him, in some interviews and writings, he described himself again and again as a journalist, and that he said somewhere that I read that he never wrote anything that he hadn't witnessed. And I think there is at the moment in literature, in Western literature, a dogma of authenticity and a cult of authenticity which Percival skewered so brilliantly in Erasure. And it's this idea that we can be reduced to very simple tropes, and if we seek to go beyond them, we're somehow inauthentic to ourselves. And I think that is quite a pernicious poison that is in literary culture at the moment. And the power of story, fiction if you like, is that it allows ourselves to transcend the immediate and speak to much larger truths about ourselves and our world.
Yeah.
Whereas if we allow ourselves to be enslaved by this dogma of authenticity, only write about what we think we know, which is really only the opinions of others, then we're going to fail as novelists, and the novels will fail.
In your book, Kiran, you write a lot about writing because your main characters are writers. And I was very amused when Sonia is going to write her creative writing short story, and she changes guavas to pears because she doesn't want to orientalize her characters. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this yesterday as well. I was listening to a very funny conversation between Salman Rushdie and Marlon James, the Jamaican writer who was here in Jaipur. And I think Salman Rushdie was asked, what advice he would give a young writer, and he said, all the fruit in titles, just don't put fruit in your title. And I felt so embarrassed because of my hullabaloo in the guava orchard.
But I love the way you sort of poke gentle fun at your own book
and it's
in
true.
this book.
I mean, don't put tropical fruit in your titles.
Yeah.
But why? Why? Because for us it's quite normal to eat a tropical fruit, right? So exotic to whom is the question. But I have found that I will question what I'm doing in a novel because I know it's going to be looked at in a particular way, read in a particular way. Who's the audience? Who's going to be examining it? It's a ridiculous thing. It's a ridiculous thing that you think fiction should be free, but it's not free. Your writing is going to be seen from a political angle. It's going to be looked at in a certain way. So I myself have sometimes think like, I'm going to take the guava out now. I'm just going to make it an apple.
Is that what you feel as well, Tash? When you were writing about Malaysia in this new book?
Actually, no. I feel very... I have a very curious relationship with my writing because I always believe that no one is going to read anything I write. So I'm completely free to write whatever I want to write. I do think the relationship between... the writers always say that they're writing either fiction or non-fiction. But whatever form they say they're working in, I always think it reveals so much more about themselves than they think it is. So, for example, when a writer writes very clearly non-fiction, they say things like, "I'm pitching a project to my publisher on a subject, and the subject has seemingly nothing to do with them." The question is always, why are you drawn to that non-fiction subject? So I'm just going to write about an abusive mother. It speaks volumes about the kind of relationships they must have. Why are you drawn to those kinds of relationships? And I think the converse is true. We say we want to write fiction because we want to work in a form that is free from the requirements of authenticity. And this is what I tell myself often. I hate the idea of authenticity, as Richard's pointed out. I think it's a very limiting thing. And yet, I do still keep being drawn back to certain people, certain settings, and certain themes. So actually, am I really as free from my concerns as I think I am? I think we always set out to think we're going to write something that's bigger than ourselves. But really, we're just writing manifestations of who we are.
Mm-hmm. I'm not entirely sure I have anything to add. I was just sort of laughing to myself about the idea of, are there any rules, and that someone gives such a mad, wonderful, specific response, don't have fruit in the title. Because in a way, of course, we know there are no rules, but it's nice the idea that you could reassure some people in the audience, yes, there is one rule. They think, right, tick, I will do that, yeah. I once was teaching a class and I said that I really felt that the word gingerly meant nothing, and then everything that they wrote for me after that had the word gingerly in to try and disprove it. But sometimes you feel so sure you've hit upon one rule, like, what does gingerly even mean? I'm just not going to use it anymore. So it's a little bit like that. But I think that even if you're writing fiction, it's almost always you come across something that has so many facts that will take away the believability for your readers in what you're writing, that you have to find the sort of factual truth in it. And I find myself, although one of the things I think I don't like is research, and I love to just make things up. I'm almost always finding that I've written myself into a corner where I actually cannot go on until I leave my study and go and travel to some place or go to a library and find something, because I need it to be utterly believable. Because we all know, reading a book, if you find one thing that just you don't believe in, or you realize that's actually not true, you lose faith in everything. So I find myself doing so much more research than I ever have planned to do with each book.
Yeah. Which part of your writing do you enjoy the most? Is it the research? Is it the first draft? Is it the edits?
I love beginning, and then I get stuck in the murky middle, sometimes for years. And I'm like, why? And then I read the beginning and I'm like, I love it. I have to find a home for that beginning. And on I go.
It's a total opposite for me. I can't bear beginnings. Beginnings slow me down. I mean, I can spend years on the beginning. I was very heartened to read an interview with Hilary Mantel many years ago, when she was asked what was the last thing she ever did with a novel when she was editing, and she's always said she always rewrote. When she'd finished the novel, she went back to the beginning to rewrite it. Mm-hmm. Because only when she wrote the novel and had finished it that she knew what it was meant to be and what the form and the style and the purpose of the novel was. And therefore, the beginning had to reflect that, whereas she didn't know that at the beginning.
You have to sort of write your way. I find that I feel as if the novel is there and I have to find it somehow. I feel as if it does exist already, but my job through my writing is to reach it somehow. And
you see a glimpse of it. Then.
Sorry?
You see glimpses of it.
Yeah, it's as if, that until I reach the place where that novel is, bit by bit, character by character, it's never going to let me go, even if I hate it. I really find the first draft part both difficult and joyous, but it's a sort of secret. Do you tell people what you're writing? Do you show them your drafts and things before the whole thing is done? Yeah?
No.
No. Good.
I found it to be catastrophic. And,
yeah. Why would it be catastrophic?
Well, I think it exists in a final finished form, or it doesn't really exist at all, because showing parts of a novel, it's like showing a big toe or an earlobe and asking people to sort of work out the human being that it's connected to, and of course they can't. And they say idiotic, flattering things about the toe or the earlobe, and they don't have a clue at all what you're trying to do, and they're lying to you. So that's rather disillusioning. But I mean, everyone works in different ways, and but myself, no, I show no one.
Because Esther, you teach creative writing. That involves sharing work before it's complete, isn't it?
Well, I encourage my students to do so many things that I would never do. And I see how much it helps them sharing their work. They realize this doesn't work, or this needs cutting, or this, but I never do it. And I think it's a great idea, but it doesn't work for me, because just like you said, Richard, I feel, what if they point something out that I know? I'll be so furious. I only share my work when there's nothing I can think of doing to make it better, but I'm sure it could be better, and that's when I share it with someone. That's usually about third or fourth draft by then.
Yeah. Do you like to?
Oh, well, it took me 20 years to write the book that I just published, and I certainly didn't show it to anybody for at least 15 of those years.
Oh, gosh.
So, no. Although I am a product of writing schools, and I've also taught. But I'm really listening to what Richard just said, that, you praise the toe. And a lot of, when I am teaching, I am trying to tell students, or to try and show them where, and when you ask this whole panel is, where does writing come from? And I never think of it when I'm working, but when I teach, I have to think about it, because I think, what am I going to tell these kids? And a lot of it is trying to show them, or try to get them to see where the imaginative space of their work lies. And sometimes it's not in the complete work at all, right? It's where is the novel? Where is that creature that you are trying to find? It's often between things. It's often between places. It's often lies between contradictions, between geographies, and you can see it, and then you try and read other writers' work, and you say, oh, this is what Kafka is doing, right? There's a traveler, he's at the bottom of a bridge, he's looking up at the illusory emptiness of a castle up above, and that seems like a metaphor for writing. Something's there, you don't know how you're going to get there, but the cloudiness or that empty space is so important.
Yeah.
If I may say, I think nothing is more secondary to an author's achievement with a novel than their original ambitions and intentions.
Sadly.
And because, if a book succeeds, it escapes the author's thin personality and small history, and it becomes something much larger. And it always seems to me that you only discover the true subject of your novel after it's published and you meet your readers. And the readings, we've all met writers, and reading is a far more intelligent and creative act than writing, and writers. And it's in that communal act of reading that the book comes alive and it becomes something else. And it's quite shocking when you discover it wasn't what you intended.
And it's so, astonishing when a reader comes up to you and tells you about your book. Sometimes you haven't thought of it that way at all. Percival, did you want to add something about? Yes. Did you, Percival, did you want to add something on this?
Well, actually, it was just stated that readers are far more important than I am. They often mention scenes that I don't remember at all. And certainly I don't know what it means. I don't know what any of my books mean. I wait for the readers to tell me, and then I take credit for it. They come up with great ideas that I've never thought of.
I think on that note, we can open it up to a few questions. It's a huge audience. We have 5 minutes for questions. There's somebody right here in a red t-shirt. Would you keep it quite brief? Because
yes. So my question is to Kiran ma'am. I have read somewhere that Virginia Woolf says fiction has more facts than truth. And you yesterday were talking about how much you write in fiction what we live every day, but we don't talk about it openly. So your comment on that?
I think everyone should answer this question, not just myself. Maybe Percival should answer this question because he has not had much time here and because he's on Zoom at 5 a.m. in the morning.
Yes.
Well, that's
Thank you for joining.
very sweet of you. On my end, it sounds like I'm a giant yelling at everyone. What was the question? I am serious. I suffer from early onset dementia, and I want to know what the question was. Will someone help me?
The question I think was about living many kind of important facts on a daily basis, but not actually feeling that we're doing so.
Thank you. Well, one of the true things about fiction is deals with truth. Journalism deals with facts. You can have 5 novels that talk about what happened to Hitler in the bunker, and all of them can be true without having a single fact. And that's because we come to novels with our understanding of human beings. and the novel becomes real for us, and we see people interacting, and that's where we all become so sick and weird. We will actually argue with each other about whether a character who does not exist is doing something in line with his or her character. And I think that's wonderful. If you can get people to be that mentally ill, you're succeeding in your work.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Add to that. Yes, please.
I was thinking that Borges writes, you can tell that the Quran is an Arabic book because there isn't a single camel in it.
Like the tropical fruit.
Like the tropical fruit, absolutely.
So
lady at the
places,
back
you know,
in
when
the
you
black
really look at
sweater.
the novel gives
There's-
meaning to a place. I think that's also a fascinating thing. When you look at a place and you think of it only because of a character or because of a book, and the book creates an actual place. So the false thing creates the real thing.
Yeah,
That's also
absolutely.
interesting.
So many Indians who go to England because of the amount of Western literature we read, particularly British, feel as if they've been there before, although they've never stepped into London before. Did you want to say something, Tash? Okay, then we'll move on to there's a lady in there.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to ask you about how you choose the idea that you focus on. So I'm sure you all have many ideas for books. How do you choose one that you then cultivate into a novel?
Which of you would like to? Esther, will you go for that?
Sometimes an idea comes so clearly and cleanly, and even the title comes too, and that's such a gift and a blessing. But sometimes, like with my last book, I didn't have a clear idea at all, or it felt like nothing. I was starting to write during lockdown, and I felt no idea was clear and clean for me in the kind of noise of the world. And that's when, I think I said earlier, I just started to write, and then slowly what I wanted to write about it sort of revealed itself to me. And that was quite a painful journey. I much prefer to have the idea first, but sometimes you have the idea and it turns out there's nothing inside it. So it's never clear.
Tash, what about you?
I take a long time to settle on an idea, but then when I finally do, it tends to be the right one, and it's a question of sort of just fashioning it into something that resembles a novel.
I think we are out of time. It says 0000 here, so thank you all for being here. I know it's late, you're tired. Thank you to this wonderful panel. Thank you to the JLF.